צהריים טובים. קודם כל אני מבקש לוודא שלא יהיו צלצולים במשך המפגש. ברוכים הבאים למפגש עם המלחין פסקל דוספן. אני אעבור לאנגלית על מנת שהאורח שלנו יהיה בעניינים. We are very happy to host Pascal Dusapin with us, and we will begin this meeting straight with music. We will hear now Attacca for two trumpets and timpani by Pascal Dusapin from 1991. The players will be Rona Brosch and Goni Eshed trumpets, Noya Schlein timpani, and Shu Yan conducting. Please. I want to invite Professor Tomer Lev, head of the Buchmann Mehta School of Music, to address you.
Members of the Dan David Prize Board and Management, members of the Israel Composers League, faculty and students of Tel Aviv University and the Buchmann Mehta School of Music. We are delighted to welcome all of you to this event in the honor of composer Pascal Dusapin, recipient of the Dan David Prize for 2007 in the field of contemporary music. It is not very common that international comprehensive prizes committees, such as the Dan David Prize, dedicate one of the awards to the field of contemporary music, and thus we are very pleased that the Dan David Prize Board has decided to do so, and by doing so, to support this unjustly neglected field. After all, it is our time and the spirit of our time that is being manifested in contemporary art and in contemporary music, and it is everybody's duty, maybe even everybody's basic instinct, to nurture such fields. By doing so, the Dan David Prize is once again proving itself with an original and non-conformist concept that is being manifested in its not too many years of existence, and hopefully also will be like that in the future. Having awarded this year's prize to composer Pascal Dusapin gives us all the pleasure to reacquaint ourselves with one of today's most distinctive voices in contemporary music. We hope that today's intimate gathering will be just the beginning of a continuous collaboration between Tel Aviv University and Mr. Dusapin, and between the Israel music scene and his musical output. Mr. Dusapin's vision includes not only spiritual projects, such as compositions, but also materialistic ones, and we're very pleased to learn and to know about the very, very special project that is envisioned and being furthering, and this is the Composers Orchestral Academy, and I really hope that in his words he will say a few more words about it, so that we all know about future plans and projects that are being nowadays in work. So I hope that you all enjoy this gathering. We're very happy that we were able to do this in spite of the strike and all the other unhappy events that all around surrounding us, and to dedicate ourselves for a couple of hours to wonderful music and to the art. Thank you very much.
I would like to invite Mr. Dan Yuhas, composer, chairman of the Israeli League of Composers, and composition teacher at the Buchmann Mehta School of Music. Please, Dan.
Good morning. 10 years ago, I was a member of a jury of the Leonard Bernstein composition competition. And this jury granted unanimously the first prize to Pascal Dusapin. I am very pleased today to greet Pascal Dusapin here again and to be sure that we were not mistaken then, and he deserves the prize now as well. Welcome.
Thanks, Dan. Allow me to address you as dear friends. I am very happy to host today among us Pascal Dusapin as the recipient of the Dan David Prize, adjudicated this year to contemporary musical composition. First of all, I am happy with the fact that the Dan David Prize has chosen our domain as word of a prize, as Tomer Lev said some minutes before. In a world in which art, a non-lucrative activity, is confined to a secondary place, if at all, in the public consciousness, I feel that this kind of recognition encourages and stimulates creative artists and compensates them with a positive echo to their otherwise somehow secluded and solitary activity. Solitude and peace of mind are surely needed, but it is good to know that society retributes and shows signs of gratitude and need which are not part of the market laws. On the other hand, the choice of Pascal Dusapin as the recipient of this prize is a special reason to be proud of. In the following words, I would like to describe the significance of Dusapin's music, first, of course, through the filter of my subjective experience. I got acquainted with Dusapin's music around 20 years ago or so. I heard a chamber piece of him from a record I bought in a stand in a street of Paris. It was Feast, a powerful and concise work for a small ensemble. I was impressed by the expressive force of the work, by the plastic quality of the musical setting, and by a strong linear quality that the music showed in spite of the complexity and richness of the texture. So I would like to invite Mrs. Gabi David, who is honoring with her presence, and ask her to say some words before I continue.
Good morning, Boker Tov, Baruch haba, Bienvenue, Benvenuto, welcome in Israel. I shall speak English even though my mother tongue is Hebrew, in honor of our guest. Pascal, I heard that now I permit myself to call you a first name, and I hope you're accepting it. I heard your music right now, and I don't know what you had in your mind, but in the arts you permit us to live the music in our way, in our understanding, in our language. I was in the Holy Temple. I heard the priests holding the very holy instrument which is called the shofar, which is a horn. I could see the priests, I could hear them, I could hear the arguments between them. That's where you led me with your music, and for that I thank you. I had a moment of being in the holy of the holiness for me as a Jewish woman who lives our past, present, and future like my husband does. Thank you all for being here, and I hope we should have more pleasure with Pascal Dusapin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. David. The work we just heard, Feast, was written in '82. It's like 25 years ago. And I understood the music then as a flow of dense lava which erupted from an expressive need full of certitude. The logic of the flow, the musical syntax, obeyed to a kind of melodic logic, a thread thick and rich in information, which I felt was, however, linear in its character. I went on with my interest in Dusapin's music. I learned about his formation as a disciple of Xenakis, the only one recognized as such by the master, his affiliation to the heritage of Varese, his work with Donatoni. It was clear to me already at this point that his musical way was linked directly with the Varese tradition without any other stylistical or technical filter, so as to create a personal, independent musical idiom. When referring to Varese tradition, I mean not only the musical spatial conception so dear to him, music as sound sculpture in space, but also to a primeval musical expression, an expression that in Varese's world was inspired by primitive cultures, real or ideal. What counts, what results, I think, is a very direct form of expression in which the artist testifies his confrontation with the basic experiences of life, a sense of being in front of an abyss, of feeling a limit situation, using the term of Jaspers. We have just heard, at the beginning of our meeting, Ataka, a work whose title refers to a musical expression, a musical convention, just as Coda, written more or less at the same time. Ataka refers in music to the anacrusis, to the upbeat, to the landing connecting into the next principal section. But it has in itself a sense of warning, of beware of. Don't we hear in this music the tragic foreseeing of what is next to fall on us, the fatality of our destiny? Doesn't this quasi-martial music, trumpets and drums, announce an inevitable catastrophe? I return to my personal experience in regard to Dusapin's works. After having known other works of him, the wonderful Hope for Ensemble, among others, for example, I was surprised to hear in the late 90s a work for cello and orchestra, which won the prize in the Bernstein Composition Contest in Jerusalem. It's called Cello, Heavens in Italian. I was surprised by what seemed to me a turn to a more direct, melodic, quasi-modal writing. When some years later I suggested the performance of Coda to one of our country's ensembles, which we performed again here 2 years ago, I saw the interesting connection between the thick line and the massive sonorities to the direct melodic expression in which Coda's ending derives. Not only a modal character, but a strong inclination specifically towards the Phrygian mode, and its both archaic and oriental associations. The same Phrygian mode that rules in Attaka. Let's hear the end of Coda. This turn into the nude melodic line, clean or more or less enriched in various heterophonic ways, stressed to me the independence and uniqueness of Dusapin's way. Independence from paved ways and strategies of the so-called avant-garde. It is interesting to note how much uniform and disciplined can be even those who claim to be the strugglers for free and new ways of expression. True expression, in order to be true, has to be unique. Significance and signifier have to be correspondent. So each new utterance must be new in the means which serve to deliver it. But many times we see that things get mixed up, and the human being, even being an artist, falls into fashions and mannerisms that look new but are what we or someone expect as new. It is cliché avant-garde and not the unique expression we are looking for. And as Dusapin shows, sometimes the simpler means, pitch, rhythmic gesture, melody, expresses a more novel way when they are involved in a committed expressive situation. This process of passing organically from a sculptural sound conception to a melodic linear one has to take into account two distinctive characteristics of Dusapin's music. On the one hand, his increasing tendency to create in the dramatic vocal genre, and on the other, what I will refer following as an existential meaning of the sound utterance. We will see that these two factors are very much interlinked between themselves. In 1989, Dusapin writes his first opera, Romeo and Juliet. This will be followed by Medea Material after Heiner Müller, To Be Sung after Gertrude Stein, Perella, Uomo di Fumo, and last year, Faustus, The Last Night, with his own libretto based on Christopher Marlowe, Shakespeare's contemporary, and other sources. To this, we might add his Operatorio, La Melancolia, from 1992. The focus into the dramatical musical work could explain by itself the evolution of the musical material into singing ways. A little like the passing from polyphony to basso continuo monody at the beginning of the 17th century, at the time of the creation of the first operas and oratorios. But this monody, appearing in Dusapin's work, is imbued with the multiform, quasi-chaotic, and perhaps unconscious nature of the former sound sculpture. Suddenly, the paramodal melodies sound different, new, fresh. And still, melody is subject to dramatic and expressive gesture in a very abstract manner. For example, near the end of Faustus, The Last Night, we hear a vocal quartet that includes sheer shouting, a magnificent, very extended coloratura soprano shouting that may be unique in the opera repertoire. It is melody and counterpoint to the other simultaneously singing characters, but at the same time, it is abstract sound. In fact, these, as many other instances, see the work Commedia after Dante from 93, combine the instrumental abstract sound material with a linear vocal one that share the same gestural expressive character. This was the first part of Commedia, that it's not just Commedia, it's from the Divina Commedia by Dante Alighieri. I mentioned before another important aspect of Dusapin's music, which is also connected to this return to basic musical materials. I called it existential. Paraphrasing Sartre, I could say that in this sense, the existence of sound precedes its essence, its meaning. I feel that it is like if the composer throws a dice and listens to the result of the throw, reacts to it, shapes it differently, etc. This impression I have, every sound, rhythm, or sound combination is worth by itself, is much present in his piano etudes, for example. We will hear today the last two of the series. But there is another existential meaning to this. Also, at the non-vocal music, at the music in which a verbal text is absent, we hear the mechanisms of speech. A word, the subsequent listening to it, the thinking about it, the reaction, and perhaps the most important, silence. I feel that Dusapin's music is one of those which respects silence more than any. I heard once a writer quoting an old Chinese proverb. When you write a word, you must be sure it's worth more than the silence that existed before. But not only that, in Akuya for piano and orchestra from 2002, part of the climaxes, dramatically speaking, are the silence itself. The meaning of the title is to remain speechless. As a parallel in the domain of the drama, we can put as example another kind of silence, a conceptual philosophical one this time. At the end of Faustus the Last Night, Togod, an imaginary personage which combines the literal meaning of his name, to God, Togod, with an inversion of Beckett's Godot, tells Faust, who desperately searched for light during all the opera, all his life, the truth. He tells the truth. There is nothing. That's it. And here we reach the point that seems to me the most fundamental when describing Dusapin's expression. Other than the melancholic and lamenting character of most of it, there is this sense of wonder, of a speechless reaction to the world, and it results in the uncompromised way of listening to every sound phenomenon. We can say perhaps that much of it strives towards silence as a goal, but an active, screaming, should I say, silence. A kind of realization in music of the Sartrean dichotomy of being and nothingness. Nothing is granted, nothing is clear or explained in advance. Everything is subject to an astonished inquiry. So here the existential music composition joins to the phenomenological strategy for action, the absence of a preconceived strategy, the need to react in real time to every detail of the sound perception. Thus, the present is more present, more unpredictable, more alive. I congratulate Mr. Dusapin for receiving the Dan David Prize, and I wish him and us that he will continue his creative journey further on and go on telling us in his new works about those still unknown silences. Thank you very much. I would like now to invite Pascal Dusapin himself to speak to us. Please.
Good morning. It's an honor for me to be there in Israel also. But it will be a very difficult exercise for me because my English is very bad. For the moment it's okay, but thank you. Thank you for everything, and first for the Dan David Prize, because it changed my life completely. You can't believe it. But I try to tell you some very simple things, about music. I began the music. I don't know if I began the music, in fact, because I had very early the sentiment to be not with the music, but with the sound. My problem wasn't the music, in fact. It was to be in the sound. But to understand that, it was so hard for me. Very, very hard. Because when you are young, very young, the wall between the sound and the music, it wasn't clear for me. And I had the sentiment with the music to be with the sound. My life was very simple. When I heard sound, for example, the sound of the wind, when I was very young, I was always looking for the sound of wind, because it was like a liquid for me, amniotic liquid. Is it possible to say that? Amniotic liquid. And one time in a hotel, when I was in holiday with my parents, I heard the clarinet. It was like a wind for me. And I was maybe 5, 6 years old, and I wanted to be a clarinetist immediately. For this reason, I received piano lessons. Okay, it will be a piano. But I wasn't a good pianist. And later, at 10, I discovered the organ. The organ, it was the wind. It was so marvelous for me. But I wasn't a good student. It was a tragedy. It was a tragedy also for me, because this intention to be a musician, to be with the music, and to be so so bad musician. It was that's okay. Okay, thank you. And I was like a mystery, because my hearing, I had very early a good hearing, but to play, it was normal, but not exceptional. For example, now I have no piano in my home. I am just a musician on the table, and all the music for me was completely mentalized, completely inside my body. And to be a pianist or an organist, it's very private, as problem. But now I decide to explain that, because when I was young, I was sick. I had a big problem in my brain, I was always in the hospital, and it was a chance for me. For this reason, I became composer like that, because all the music for me was completely mentalized. For me, music was just paper. And it was quite impossible for me to play the piano, because I was always in the hospital. That's real. But that's okay now. I'm okay. But at 18, I decided to be architect. It was like the music for me, the forms, the structures, the elements you can organize between them. For me, the architecture was the solution. And I made some confusion between architecture and music. And for me, it was the connection. The architecture was the connection to organize the music. But I did not know anything about those questions, those problems. But I had the sentiment to have for the first time the possibility to organize something. For example, you take an element and another one, and you introduce between them a relation. For example, you can take a circle and a square, and you organize the circle with the square in a new form, and after you can take another circle, maybe bigger, and to organize something like that, you know. And I had the sentiment, okay, this is possible to create something just with forms. And I studied 2 years the architecture like that. But with the music, the connection arrived like that in the music. And I discovered in the same times the music of Edgar Varèse. All my life changed in 24 minutes. All. When I heard Arcana, my life changed like that. In 24 minutes. And it was so clear for me. I want to be a composer. But Varèse was dead. It was not practical, you know. The only person able to think something about the new way discovered by Varèse was Xenakis. And Xenakis was alive. And he was also an architect. The connection, the circle was perfect for me. And it was very simple to meet Xenakis. He was teacher to the university. And in 74, between 74 and 78, I followed the cursus of Xenakis in the university. But I was also in the conservatory with Olivier Messiaen 1 year, just 1 year. But for me it was not so easy because I was a guy very savage, you know, and it was impossible for me to go inside the structure, sorry, in this place, but for me it was absolutely impossible to follow the teaching of the conservatory. But it was not the same time. It was so classical. And Messiaen, it was the last year he was teacher. And I was a guy maybe a little bit strange, and I preferred to study it with Xenakis. Xenakis was not interested about me, you know. I had no existence with him for 2 or 3 years. And after, he was curious about me. And I wrote the music quasi immediately, because my theory was, I was a good guy for theory, for writing. But for example, in the first piece you heard, a fist, I wrote, I was 24, 25 years old. You can hear in this music something very strong, very savage, because for me the music, it was a war. For me it wasn't, I had the relation with the music very hard. It was like a shock in permanence for me. For this reason my music on this period is always savage. Is it correct? Yeah. Very strong. And this conflict, you know, it was impossible for me to engage my life with this kind of conflict, because to write the music is so difficult, you know, the tension in the brain is so enormous for me. I think now when I'm hearing my music of this period, and it's always the case now, I'm observing this music yes, it's like a war music, because I wasn't in peace. I was not in peace with this job, to write music. Much tension, many tension inside the sound. But the form was there. And after, I wrote the music not more in peace, but more calm, but I try to organize the elements I discover. For example, in Fist, you have three forms in an abstract point of view, of course. The line, like Anna Cruz. You have harmony, vertical position, and like in classical music. And you have also some volumes. For example, I can give an example. This very simple example, could give you an example of the problematic of the composition to organize the sound, the space, because this is not a musical problem. In fact, this is a formal problem. You can find exactly the same problem in the architecture or in the photography. For example, if you want to take a photography of this space, the problem will be, should be to organize the relation between the white of the wall, the white, and the black of this piano. What kind of importance do you want to accord to the black of the piano? You can change all the structure just to move the camera to the links or to the right, And if you want to have a focus on the piano, it's possible to have a focus, to have details on the piano and to have a very precise form and to have something behind very flou, comme on dit flou, very not unprecise. This is also a musical problem. To have a sound in the first position, to have a sound in the second position, like an orchestra. For example, in an orchestra, it's a problem of the perspective more than the space in two dimensions. For example, when you write for the piano, you write in the space like that, high, hauteur, and the time. With the orchestra, it's possible to go in the diagonal sense, to have a sound in the first position, to have another one in the very far away position. Is it correct? And the perspective in the orchestra to organize the sound between three spaces, melodic space, harmonic space, and volumetric space, is just a creation problem. It's not a musical problem. For this reason now, after 30 years of writing, you know, I had the sentiment to be completely musician, and to have the sentiment, this is a paradox, of course, but my reality is I don't think about music, never. The music is completely inside my body. I'm thinking always form, spaces, emotions, also affects, humors, but in the sense, in the sense of the creation. I think to write music, it's necessary sometimes to forget the music, because the music is so strong, it's so the passion in the music sometimes it's a danger for me. Well, this is it's an improvisation, but you heard the first piece, for example, Attacca. Attacca, I wrote this little piece for 2 trumpets and timpani for an inauguration, for an opening in Brussels for the opera, the new direction of the opera. It was a big fest, you know, and it was for my second opera I wrote in 91. Just 2 or 3 days before the first, it was a gala night, open night, you know, it was very chic, soirée. And the director asked me to write a little piece, like a fest like that, you know. And I wrote this piece, and the trumpet are in the completely different position, you know, around the audience with the timpani on the stage. It was a piece like a fanfare piece, but it was also, it's a very simple piece, but it's necessary to hear this piece in 3 positions, completely different, because all the elements, the 3 elements, are completely independent. But you have to know the secret of this little piece. This piece is wrote in the opposite sense. I began the score at the last bar. You know, the first trumpet. I remember maybe it could be the second one. I wrote like that. I chose the duration, 4 minutes. I began the last bar. And I organized the time in this sense to the beginning. And after, I wrote the second part, you know, in this sense. You know. And after, I took those elements and I made the reduction, you know, like that. Very few spaces, some bars with many, many notes. I took the elements, these 3, this part number 3, and j'ai renversé, comme on dit ça. Yeah, voilà. And I extend it in the very low position, and it was the part of the timpani. For this reason, this piece is a little bit strange to hear it, because you have 3 spaces completely different and animated by the same sentiment, you know. And it was a piece, Attacca was a piece like that, in the suburb of my music. And but those elements, very simple, very modal, in fact, you know. I learned many, many things new to organize my own music after, you know. And I decided in the same period to write a cycle of pieces for orchestra. I chose 7 pieces, and I began in '91 a cycle, symphonic piece for orchestra. The first is completely organized about the thematic of Ataka, but it's quite impossible to know exactly because the relations are completely, under the material, under the reality. In fact, the title of this piece is "Go," and go, on y va. With the subtitle Solo Number 1, because the solo was it was like a human, the orchestra as a soloist. And it's an emotion for me to tell you that, because it was the conductor was of this piece with the New York Orchestra was the Miroslav Rostropovich. It was a big experience to work with him. He was a fabulous musician, completely mad, but so marvelous guy. And after I took this piece, Go, and I contract absolutely the piece like that, in this kind of just, for example, the space of this music Go is 10 minutes, and I reduced in 10 seconds, yeah. But it was just an abstract, it's just an abstract work, of course, it's not realistic. But to reduce, to contract the material in this kind of space give me many possibilities to extend it after. And you will hear the result with extenso, extendere. And after I wrote another piece, solo number 3, Apex, after solo number 4, Clam, the number 5, 6. I wrote the number 6 the last year for Simon Rattle and the Berliner Philharmoniker. And the title is Reverso. The piece Reverso, a rovescio. It's a Latin word, reverso, to be in the sense, the opposite sense. And this piece it's like a page, It's like that, And after you can déplier, comme on dit déplier. It's like a music. For example, for Reverso, I began exactly at the center of the piece. I wrote the beginning to the end, It's a composition in different moments, and it's quite impossible to have this sentiment when you hear the music. And I would like to, not now exactly, but to propose, I wanted to propose this piece extenso because I think it's very simple with this piece to know exactly what is happening between the 3 spaces as I spoke, the line, the harmony, and the volume, and the negotiation between those spaces. But my intention is not to, with the music, it's not to explain this kind of things, My intention with the music is very simple. It's to give you the music, and just to the very simple mode, the very simple thing with the music, to be. For this reason, I'm always interested about operas, because the problem is just to communicate the expression. I'm writing an opera now for the X Festival for the next year. The title is Passion. It's very interesting to write this opera, Passion, but not in the sense of normal sense, in the sense of affect. It's a project about Monteverdi, expression of passions. I'm writing it in Italian. Well, this kind of thing. Extenso, I wrote it in 1993. And the duration is something around 12, 13 minutes. I think we will hear two pieces of piano, no? And the cycle of the piano, the cycle of those pieces is always organized in 7 pieces. I have a project with string quartet for 7 pieces too. The cycle for orchestra I began in 1991. I have to finish it in 2 years, in 2009. And in Paris we will organizing a concert with the 7 pieces. It will be an enormous concert, with 2 hours of orchestra, like a symphony, in fact, because it's we can play, completely in continue. For example, with Extenso, you will have this sentiment: the piece is too short. It's just finished before like that, because after something must continue. And, well. We can hear Extenso. Just a few words about something very important in my life now, because I love the orchestra. in general, but I love to work with orchestra and the musician and of the orchestra. And I had some years ago, 4 years ago exactly, an idea to invent a new project for an academy of orchestra for composers, and this academy could be possible now. And I invent a concept, a completely new concept about not orchestra, but about for young composers in Europe to build something about this academia in the south of France, to propose to the young composer a very good instrument and an academy for orchestra, but with the orchestra. This is completely different. And with the orchestra alive in front of the composer. And I made a co-production with many European orchestras. For example, to invite the composer, those young composers in many countries in Europe. Because it's very important now, because to invent and to, in a certain sense, to obligate the orchestra, the philharmonic orchestra to give and to play modern music, especially in the economic context now and the cultural context in the world. If the orchestra is completely devoted to the classical music, the orchestra will be dead in very early. It will be dead, or maybe just some orchestra like museum. And my intention is to not to obligate all the orchestra in Europe or in the world, of course, but it's very important now. The composers are involved in the life of the symphonic orchestra, and I'm working about this project, and it's very hard, especially for politic reasons, exclusively for politics reasons, in fact. But I am courageous. And thank you for this invitation, and thank you to the Tel Aviv University, and thank you for the Dan David Prize.
We will, thanks a lot, Pascal, for your words and interesting things that you said, and for the wonderful orchestral piece. We would like to finish this meeting with music again, and with the performance of our students. We will hear the last two studies, Etudes, from the series of piano studies that Pascal Dusapin has written between the end of the former millennium and this one, the beginning of this one. We will hear Etude number 6 for piano, performed by Avinoam Shalev, and Etude number 7, the last, by Maor Tzur. The two etudes are connected. So I invite the players to play, and thank you very much for coming and being with us.